My name is Camila, and I'm standing on the balcony of a luxury resort in Miami Beach. The view of the ocean at dusk is breathtaking, but my heart is heavy. This one-week vacation, which was supposed to be a chance for me to make lasting memories with my family, has turned into a nightmare, thanks to my sister-in-law, Ella. I've been happily married to Daniel for 7 years. Both of us are successful vice president in major corporations, and we've worked hard to get where we are today. Early on, we made the decision not to have children. It just didn't fit with our busy lives. Instead, we've enjoyed 3 major vacations a year and the occasional weekend getaway. It's been a fulfilling rhythm for us. For the past few years, we've invited Daniel's parents to join us on our annual family trip. Daniel's father, William, is 67 years old, and his health has been slowly declining. His mother, Harriet, is 67 and has been shouldering much of the responsibility for his care. This year's trip was especially important to William. He wanted to return to Miami, where he and Harriet had gone for their honeymoon nearly 36 years ago. His voice carried a sense of urgency, as if he felt this might be his last chance to relive that memory. I didn't hesitate to offer to cover all the expenses for the trip. It was a lot of money, but seeing their joy was worth every penny. After all, they had welcomed me into their family as a daughter for the past decade. Everything started to change, though, when my sister-in-law Ella, who's 32 and a stay-at-home mom with 3 young children, asked if she could come along. Ella's financial situation was tough, and her husband's income barely covered their basic needs. Every time we posted photos from our vacations, she would comment with a sigh, saying she hadn't had a decent vacation in years. Since she was family, I agreed to cover her expenses as well. Looking back, that might have been my first mistake. From the moment we arrived in Miami, Ella's behavior was off. The first red flag came just a few hours after we checked into the resort. "Camila, would you mind taking our picture? I want one with just my family," she said. Her words hit me like a sharp blade, and in that instant, it felt as though the relationships I had spent years nurturing were being erased. Daniel seemed confused, but he didn't say anything, not wanting to upset the mood. But that was just the beginning. Ella continuously found ways to exclude me from the group. Whether it was during photo ops at tourist spots, seating arrangements at restaurants, or even casual gatherings by the pool, she made sure to treat me like an outsider. The most blatant example of this came during a boat tour. The boat had 2 rows of seats, each with 2 seats, making it ideal for a family of 4. With 5 people, someone had to ride in a different boat, and that's when Ella put her plan into motion. She arranged for her parents to sit in the first row and made sure to secure the seat next to Daniel for herself. "This setup is perfect for a family photo, don't you think?" she said with a smile. As a result, I ended up riding alone in the second boat, surrounded by strangers. Later, Ella posted a picture of her family on the boat, a commemorative photo that is now on her social media feed. That photo is now burned into my mind as a painful reminder of how my vacation turned into an emotional struggle. While my husband and his family were busy creating perfect memories together, I was left out in the cold, feeling like a stranger in my own family. I found myself awkwardly mingling with strangers, and as the situation unfolded, it took an unexpected turn. Ella, who had initially been reserved, slowly started to embrace the lavish amenities of the resort, her once modest demeanor growing bolder with each passing day. One particularly uncomfortable moment occurred at the upscale seafood restaurant I had meticulously reserved for weeks. I had made sure to secure a table with a breathtaking view of the sunset at Miami's most renowned waterfront eatery. Upon arrival, the hostess guided us to a round table meant for 6, perfectly positioned to take in the golden glow of the ocean during the golden hour. Daniel and I were supposed to sit together, enjoying the view with his parents seated across from us. Ella, who had joined us at the last minute, was supposed to take a side seat. However, before we could settle in, Ella swiftly took the seat next to Daniel and positioned her parents in the best spots to enjoy the sunset. I found myself pushed to the worst seat, near the waiter station, with my back facing the beautiful sunset I had so carefully planned to enjoy. This treatment, especially considering that I had meticulously planned the dinner, prompted Daniel to stand up and suggest we switch the seating arrangement. But Ella quickly snapped at him, reminding everyone that this was a family trip and that the seating should reflect that. As the evening dragged on, dinner only seemed to get worse. I tried to join the conversation and find common ground, but Ella had other plans. Every time I attempted to participate, she deliberately steered the conversation toward topics like childhood memories, high school adventures, and family inside jokes. Even when Daniel and his parents tried to bring me into the discussion, Ella swiftly changed the subject. What concerned me more, though, was Ella's attitude toward money. When it came time to order, she didn't hesitate to pick the most expensive wine on the menu and ordered everything from appetizers to desserts without a second thought to the cost. Since this is a family trip, let's make it a memorable meal, she said, her tone challenging and dismissive of any concerns about the price. Her behavior only escalated from there. Ella started using the room charge system linked to my credit card as though it was an unlimited shopping spree. She ordered luxurious treatments at the spa, made impulse purchases at designer boutiques, and requested premium champagne by the poolside. With every order, she piled on more extravagant requests without ever mentioning the cost. It was as if she assumed I would simply pay for everything. "This massage is amazing. Maybe I'll book another for tomorrow," she said. "This boutique has such lovely dresses. I need to get souvenirs for the kids too. And for dessert tonight, Dom Perignon would be perfect." Her spending was far beyond her usual habits, but seeing how happy Daniel's parents were, I didn't stop her right then. However, that night, when Daniel and I were alone, he seemed concerned. He looked at me with worry and said, "Ella's charges are going to be pretty high?" "I know," I replied, though I couldn't bring myself to confront her at that moment. "But seeing your dad so happy tonight, I made a decision." On our last morning in Miami, I suggested to Daniel, "Take your parents to the airport. Ella and I will go later." Daniel immediately seemed to understand my intentions without needing further explanation. "What are you planning?" "Don't worry, I promise I'll stay neutral," I said, offering reassurance. He nodded slightly, just enough to acknowledge my words. It was a small sign of agreement, especially considering how his sister had been purposefully ignoring me all week. I made my way to the front desk, armed with a well-thought-out plan. The hotel's billing system worked in my favor. It was convenient for me. The room charges had already been prepaid, but any additional expenses incurred during the stay were to be settled at checkout. This included room service orders, spa treatments, and all the poolside cocktails Ella had indulged in during the week. I politely asked the hotel manager to separate the charges for tax purposes. Without hesitation, the manager agreed, as it was a standard procedure. While the bills were being split, I couldn't help but reflect on Ella's behavior. It struck me that she had never once considered the emotional or financial consequences of her actions. After the payments for Daniel's parents' suite and our own room were processed, I waited. My in-laws had already left for the airport, needing extra time because of William's health and wheelchair requirements. This left only Ella and me in the hotel lobby. The manager soon called her to the counter, and I noticed her face pale as she saw the itemized bill. The total amount was staggering, likely more than she spent in several months, based on her usual lifestyle. Her eyes darted between the bill and my face as the weight of the situation dawned on her. What started as confusion quickly shifted into panic. "You're not paying for me, are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. I remained calm. "I've already paid for the family. You'll need to cover your own expenses." Ella's hand shook as she handed over her credit card. But when the manager swiped it, the response was immediate. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card has been declined," she said, confirming what I had already suspected. Ella had lived a lavish lifestyle throughout the week, assuming I would pick up the tab. The manager tried the card again, but the outcome was the same. The credit limit on Ella's card didn't even come close to covering the accumulated charges, everything from her spa visits to the special dinners. The realization hit her hard. The situation she had been ignoring had finally caught up to her, and she was left to face it without my help. For the next 27 minutes, the hotel lobby became a sort of stage, with Ella pacing back and forth, desperately trying to figure out how to resolve the crisis. Every few minutes, she cast a glance at me, hoping I would offer to pay. But I sat still on the plush sofa, outwardly calm. I knew I could end her predicament with a simple swipe of my own card, but I refused to do so, not without her offering an apology for her behavior during the trip. Her pride, however, prevented her from taking that step. Finally, Ella made the call I had been expecting. I could hear her voice rise slightly as she explained the situation to her husband, how the total amount she had spent was nearly the same as his monthly salary. On the other end of the phone, I could hear his voice, questioning her, clearly surprised and maybe a little upset. Ella's reckless spending after long and exhausting negotiations left everyone wondering why she had made such decisions. After numerous promises, likely driven by desperation, a transfer was finally arranged to cover her taxi fare to the airport. Throughout the ride, Ella remained silent, likely contemplating her husband's reaction when she returned. But her troubles were far from over. Upon arriving at the airport, the ticking clock reminded her that time was running out. It suddenly hit her. She hadn't checked in for her flight yet. While I sailed through the priority check-in, Ella had to wait in the long, regular queue to check her luggage. With every passing minute, her frustration mounted. At the gate, I quietly arranged for an upgrade to business class for myself, Daniel, and his parents, ensuring a smooth and comfortable finish to our journey. Meanwhile, Ella remained stuck in her original economy class seat. As she passed the spacious business class section, her expression said it all. Without uttering a word, her clenched jaw and tense posture spoke volumes about her displeasure. While we enjoyed premium services, Ella spent the entire flight in economy class. The contrast between our comfort and her discontent couldn't have been more stark. But the moment we landed, Ella's composed exterior finally cracked. She rushed to where her parents were collecting their luggage and immediately began to spin her version of events. According to her, I had forced her to pay, publicly humiliated her, and intentionally excluded her from the flight upgrade. What she conveniently left out was the week she had spent trying to push me out of every family moment. William, clearly weary from the journey, started to look distressed as Ella's dramatic recount continued. Yet, even at that moment, she wasn't concerned about her father's health. Instead, she was too focused on portraying herself as the victim. I remained calm, waiting for the right time to speak up. When the moment arrived, I calmly explained how Ella had deliberately excluded me from every family gathering during the vacation. Whether it was the family-only photo, manipulated seating arrangements, or private conversations, all funded by me, she had made it clear I wasn't part of her family. I asked her simply, if I wasn't considered family enough to be included in the memories, why should I continue to pay for her as family? Harriet, who had witnessed Ella's behavior all week, had finally had enough. She stepped in, halting Ella's performance. "Ella, that's enough," she said firmly. "We don't want to be a part of this drama. We saw how you treated Julie. We tried to include her, but you had other plans to sideline her." Instead of accepting any responsibility, Ella escalated the situation. "You use money to control the family," she shouted at me. Then, turning to Daniel, she accused, "Your wife isn't on it too. She's teamed up with you to humiliate me. How can you be so cruel to your own sisters?" Her voice grew louder, filled with anger and frustration. "Do you see what this woman does to you? You can't do anything on your own. You're tied to her money." Her wild, unfounded accusations sparked a heated reaction from Daniel, turning the baggage claim area into the latest stage for their ongoing family drama. If it hadn't been for William stepping in, things could have gotten much worse. Throughout the trip, he had remained quiet, maintaining a composed silence, but at a crucial moment, he turned to Ella and spoke gently. "Camila has done more than enough for us and for you, as a daughter-in-law. If you can't show gratitude, at least keep quiet." His words were simple but powerful, immediately shutting down Ella's heated accusations. However, by then, the damage to our family relationships had already been done. After William's intervention, the airport terminal was filled with a heavy, uncomfortable silence. His quiet request that we leave right away carried an unmistakable authority. Without a word, I helped him to the car, and we left, leaving Ella standing there alone. She hadn't brought her own car to the airport, and despite being 67 miles from home, Her pride prevented her from asking us for a ride. A taxi fare would no doubt be expensive, but after a week of Ella intentionally shutting me out, I no longer felt any obligation to care. The drive back to my in-laws' house was subdued. When we arrived, both of them expressed their sincere gratitude for the vacation, and William gave me a hug that lasted longer than usual, filled with more unspoken meaning than words could express. We didn't talk about what had happened right away, but a few days later, Daniel finally broke the silence. He told me that Ella was struggling financially. Her husband was furious with her for racking up so many debts and for acting so irresponsibly. He demanded that she repay every penny and refused to help her with any of her lavish expenses. Ella was now having trouble managing both the repayment and her regular credit card bills. Daniel supported my actions, but in a gentle way, suggested that perhaps I had been a bit too harsh. Still, he admitted that his sister needed to be taught a lesson. For years, Ella had taken advantage of others, expecting them to cover her needs without showing any appreciation. It felt like justice had finally caught up with her, and she was now facing the consequences of her actions. If Daniel had asked me whether I regretted my decision, I could say, without hesitation, that I didn't. Sometimes, the best lessons are the hardest ones to learn, and Ella had made her own bed. When I shared the story online, there were mixed reactions. Some people thought I was too harsh and argued that I should have swallowed my pride for the sake of family harmony. But I knew my worth. I refused to be treated like a doormat, someone who silently accepted mistreatment while constantly paying for lavish vacations. I would no longer be Ella's ATM or servant. All I ever wanted was basic respect and to be included in family events. If Ella had owned up to her actions and apologized, I might have been willing to help her out with her expenses. But she valued her pride over doing the right thing. The truth is, Ella and I were never close. Our relationship had always been polite but distant, consisting only of pleasantries at family gatherings. For years, there had been no meaningful connection, no real conversations. Yet, when she asked to join the vacation, I agreed to cover her travel costs simply because she was family. That act of generosity should have earned me at least a small measure of respect, but instead, it seemed to push her further away. Her treatment of me only worsened. Ella's husband was still furious about the whole situation, and I couldn't blame him. He had to dip into his savings to cover her spending spree, and naturally, no one who works hard for their money would be pleased to see it vanish just because their spouse decided to live like royalty for a week, using someone else's funds. Instead of taking responsibility for her actions, Ella used her usual tactic. She twisted the narrative so that she played the victim, and I became the villain. During the Christmas party preparations, as my mother-in-law was working on a special celebration, Ella's husband used my father-in-law's failing health as an excuse to avoid attending, which ultimately ruined the plans. The real reason for his refusal was that he couldn't bear to sit at a table with someone who humiliates others, especially those who are financially struggling. It was at that moment that my mother-in-law decided she had had enough and sat her son down to reveal the truth about Ella's behavior during the Miami trip. She showed him the vacation photos, which exposed the reality of what had happened. Ella had posted numerous pictures on social media that clearly showed her excluding me. In some, I was deliberately pushed to the back of the frame or seated away from everyone else. The evidence of her intent to isolate me was irrefutable. My mother-in-law explained that she and my father-in-law had tried to include me in the trip, but Ella continually found ways to push me aside. What made this situation particularly hurtful was that I had always treated Ella's husband with respect. While we weren't close friends, our interactions during Christmas and other family gatherings had always been cordial. I never once looked down on him because of his financial situation or any other reason. We were simply family now, trying to support each other and contribute as much as we could. For Ella to manipulate her husband into thinking I was some kind of classist villain showed just how far she would go to avoid facing the consequences of her own actions. The issues in Miami were just the beginning. Ella had already accumulated debts she couldn't pay, and over the course of the week, she started blaming her hardworking husband for not providing a more luxurious lifestyle. My mother-in-law had tried everything to talk sense into her. She defended her son-in-law and tried to explain how unreasonable Ella's demands were, but the lavish experiences of the Miami trip seemed to have awoken something dangerous in her. Ella, who once claimed to be content with simple family vacations, became obsessed with a lifestyle she could no longer afford. The situation quickly became alarming. My mother-in-law, now deeply concerned, felt compelled to give Ella a stern warning. She told her that if her actions led to a divorce, she should not expect any support from the family. More importantly, she told Ella not to involve her father in the mess, because his health simply couldn't handle the stress of seeing his daughter's marriage fall apart because of her decisions. On the way home from the Christmas party, I couldn't help but reflect on how my well-intentioned invitation had backfired. I remembered a quote I had seen at the resort: "Once you've experienced the luxury of a private island, you'll never want to set foot on a public island again." The same can be said about someone who has flown business class after years of enduring economy. There's no going back. We had unintentionally shown Ella a world of luxury she could never maintain, and now her husband was paying the price. This whole situation has been a sobering reminder of how dangerous the pursuit of a lifestyle beyond one's means can be. It's painful to watch Ella struggle to pay her bills, but it's even more heartbreaking to see how her values have been completely distorted by her desire for more. Her husband is a good man who has worked tirelessly to support his family, yet he's now being punished simply because he can't sustain the temporary luxury Ella experienced. All I can do is hope she regains her sanity before she destroys her marriage in her pursuit of a lifestyle that is beyond her reach.